doing well. When we're doing live stream, I'm gonna wait for some people to get in. Dialing in from the airport, I like it. I'm still trying to set up my new setup. My videos did pretty good, but the live stream camera is so much different than the main back camera. So we're gonna adjust things while we wait for folks to get in. Alright, that's gonna be good enough. Because I don't want to live stream where like 10 minutes not doing anything. So we'll jump into it. Today I want to talk about a few things. One, I want to drink some tea. Good morning to you all. Hope you're having a great weekend. I'm going to do a little refresher, share a little bit more thoughts on these type of last era Yixing teapots. These were the Four Gentlemen collections that came out between like 1989, 1993 roughly, before the factory was privatized. So let's get into it. Questions, thoughts, or concerns, drop them in the chat as always. I'm going to get brewing a good cup of tea and looking forward to this live stream. So we have a few good videos in the queue, I guess. I just filmed a lot of them for the first half of 2023. So we have, of course, a unique review of the sake kettle, which I started to really enjoy, what you see up here now, comparison against the fellow. Also, the best way to brew farmer style or travel to go tea. That will also be another video in the loops. Best teacup for what type of tea, and several others. There's also a unique thing that I'll be doing with flowers here in a week or two. You'll just see it on the live stream. That was pretty fun, so looking forward to sharing all that. So Andrew, welcome. If you're in the airport, where are you heading off to? We were going to get some tea going. And curious for the folks that have gotten some of these teapots, would love to hear your feedback, how you like them so far. So yeah, let's get into it. How to buy a Yixing teapot? What do I look for? Is it even possible? I'm just going to share my own thoughts and opinions and perspective and experience. I am by no means a Yixing tea expert of any kind. So, Kuala Lumpur. Oh wow, fun. Traveling the world, globe trotter. So, if you're all in a position and you love tea, maybe you've been doing this for a while, and you've heard about Yixing teapots, and that sounds like quite a thing to add to a collection because they're world famous. They're so renowned for their unique clay qualities, and they're part of tea history. And Yixing teapots started to be exported between the 1970s and 1980s. And nowadays, you see all types of things on Yixing. You'll see things that there are no longer Yixing clay to make teapots. You'll hear there is more clay to make Yixing teapots. And so that can be quite controversial and difficult to make a decision. You'll see Yixing teapots online for less than $100. And then you see Yixing teapots for more than $1,000. So what can I do to ensure I'm going to get an authentic teapot? And it's tough, it's very difficult. My own journey, I've spent a lot of money on teapots. lots and lots of money on teapots. And unfortunately, the majority of them were newer teapots that claimed to be Yixing. And maybe later in my life, I realized the majority of those teapots were not indeed Yixing. Or even worse, maybe they're not good for my health. Maybe there's material in the teapot that is not good for my health. So usually I have recommended people always do not try to buy old Yixing teapots if you're newer or even mid-year into the tea or even becoming an expert in tea. Just stick to clean clay. You can get clean clay teapots from Taiwan, Korea, Japan. There's even some newer varieties like Jin Shui from Yunnan, but even those are getting expensive. I've always never really recommended going into trying to buy authentic Yixing because there's so many issues that can come up. Fraudulent, is it good quality, is it real, is it hazardous to my health, etc. So I finally have a few Yixing teapots. These are not fancy by any means. These are probably made by apprentices. They are probably mass produced. They're the late era of the Yixing tea factory. So I'm going to share with you the 4 factors that make up a good Yixing teapot. And then we'll go into techniques you all can use if you want to maybe try to purchase a teapot on your own. So the 4 factors are: 1 is going to be the raw material that's used, because the clay they used in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, yes, there were different qualities of clays. Throughout that process, very high quality clay, rare clay started to run out. They ran out of the clay in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, depending on the abundance of the clay. And then in the 1997, around that period, the factory was then privatized, and then it became a mess, and now there's really the issue of probably all of the clay has been run out. I was able to visit Yixing in the early 2000s, and they showed me where they mined the Yixing that used to be this huge hill. It was then now a lake, and that was probably 10 years ago or so. So if there is any more Yixing clay left out there, it's probably in very, very select warehouses for very select people, for very select famous tea masters. We probably don't have a shot at purchasing that type of tea, to be honest. So 1 is raw material. The second is time. How long has it been around? What period did the clay come from? 3rd is who made the teapot. And 4th is who used the teapot. So those are the 4 main factors of Yixing: raw material, time, who made, and who used. If teapots were to go to auction, there's 2 main contributing factors: raw material used and famous people or persons that made or used that teapot. Those are the biggest distinguishing factors for auction teapots. So with all that in mind, now we can kind of start to think about, well, what can be applicable to us? Do we have any chance of buying Yixing teapots? Well, if you're trying to buy Yixing teapots from the 1970s, 1980s, from the factory productions, easily should be in the thousands or more. 5-10 years ago, you might be able to find some unique connoisseurs that would sell a few. Maybe they had abundance, but now even those providers have limited to no teapots available because they're being bought out, not only by Eastern collectors, but also now Western collectors, because 1, they want authentic Yixing, and they also want clean clay. These teapots can also last a lifetime. They can be like a true heirloom in the family. So if you're very serious about tea and spending way too much money on tea anyway, maybe spending an outrageous amount of money on a teapot or 2 is not that too far out, right? So started to dwindle down supply, dwindle down supply. If you've been very lucky to use good quality Yixing teapots, one thing I've known in my experience, just with my time over at Danong and my tea master, is that very good Yixing teapot, kind of the ultimate test, is can your teapot make young, raw, pour good? Most teapots can't. And this is also a little controversial because my experience with young raw pour is very pleasant. It's not bitter, it's not astringent, it's not highly caffeinated. To me, those are undesirable characteristics, so I'm not brewing and drinking teas like that. But if they can make a young raw pour tea better than in a Gaiwan, that's kind of the ultimate test for me for a Yixing teapot. Very few teapots can do that very well. Usually teapots make ripe pour very good, make aged raw pour very good, but it's very tricky to be able to use a teapot to make young raw pour. So that's kind of a unique test, and that depends on clay and porous and thickness, etc. So I've had 1 or 2 teapots that were gifted to me from my tea master that I always used. All the other teapots I purchased on my own were really less than to be desired. So came across these a little while ago. What was shocked was I bought a lot of them. These are late era Yixing teapots. There's nothing special about these teapots. During the late 1980s, early 1990s, the Yixing factories were starting to they were failing financially. And a lot of that had to do with the clay, raw material, wasn't as good as it was. The demand for all these teapots may have not been high as it used to be. And the people willing to pay for those teapots weren't as high. And also, a lot of these famous tea masters who worked for these factories went on and did their own projects and get paid more money than just commissioning these teapots. So they're left with a lot of apprentices. All they have is the factory name. They were also a lot for Chinese export. China started to export a lot of teapots in the 1970s, 1980s. Hence, you know these markings on the bottom. Yixing China, right? Generic marking. So during the late 1980s, there was really just apprentices working for the factory. They were financially failing, and people could almost name their price and commission a set of teapots. So these late era teapots are mass produced. They're very roughly made by apprentices, and they lack a lot of standard. I've gotten a few dozen sets of these 4 gentlemen teapots, and even the clay is slightly different on each set. And the markings are a little bit different, the spout's not put on perfectly, the lid might be a little loose, etc. And if you go back to that time, why the late era Yixing teapots are not well respected, a lot of famous collectors or tea collectors or serious tea connoisseurs don't have a lot of respect for these late era Yixing teapots, because just a few years prior, you could get a teapot made by a master for just a little bit more money, perfectly made. So why would I want a generic mass-produced apprentice-made Yixing teapot when just a few years ago I could probably get a little bit better raw material made by a tea master? And then all these tea masters started to go out on their own and make their own pots, so they just were not in high demand. And even now, you can see tea master-made teapots, perfectly made, perfectly poured. When you get a perfect teapot, why would you get a generically made apprentice teapot? Well, the reason is, for me at least, the raw material. Now, late era Yixing teapots don't have exceptional Yixing clay. They don't have bad Yixing clay. It's just kind of generic. So, a few things you can look for on hoping maybe you can buy a Yixing teapot. I think this is the most realistic expectation of being able to buy an authentic Yixing teapot is from the late era Yixing factory. That's probably the most likelihood that it might be real, because they are not well respected. And people in that area that grew up, they rather have tea master teapots than generically mass-produced Yixing factory pots. So a few things you want to look for. 1, when you're looking for the pot, you want to make sure there is a unique, kind of granular, natural, pigmented mixture of clay. It should look very natural, maybe a little rough. You're looking for specks of black, that's the iron. And they don't have to be perfect. But the clay should not be super uniformed, because these are mass production, late era Yixing tea factories, not made by masters. The stamp is very important. The stamp should be uniform and clearly able to see on the bottom and in the center of the pot. Next, you want to make sure there is a number imprinted on the inside of the lid. There should only be 1 hole. And If it's a little bit loose fit, not perfectly put together, it's a good thing. It's more likely that someone a few years ago, when there were master pots available, had no interest in buying this because there was a perfectly situated teapot next to it, and this was overlooked. So those are a few things you want to kind of look for. The next is the smell of the teapot should be natural. It shouldn't be super funky or chemically. And those are the things I look for. This is more easy for me to pick out these pots because I had several older Yixing teapots my tea master gave me, and I used them as a reference. But there's something very unique about the mixture and natural look of the clay that's important to look for. If it has those characteristics, it might be worth getting a few of these teapots. However, I have several of these now and I've started to experiment with them. They particularly make ripe pour pretty good, semi-aged raw pour pretty good. I've yet to find one, and I haven't gone through them all because I have dozens of them, that really makes young raw pour exceptional. They will make them a little bit more fuller, but there's just not a standard in the clay. But they are Yixing clay teapots, and the raw material is quite authentic. So are they as good as the 1970s, 1980s? No. But can we afford or find those type of Yixing teapots in a reasonable manner? Probably not. So a lot of info I just dumped. I am no longer, I'm not a Yixing teapot expert. I'm just sharing my own personal experience because I very much enjoy tea. That is my primary priority. Yet I also have some respect for the older cultures of teapots. Very interesting to me. I would love to have a Yixing teapot in my collection that is at least authentic. Doesn't need to be made by a tea master or super old because those are outrageously expensive. And the more expensive the pot, the older the pot, the better the raw material that's made by a tea master or teapot master. Is the likelihood that you're going to spend more money and the likelihood that you're probably going to buy a fake teapot. The likelihood and risk just skyrockets from there. So open to some questions. And the unadulterated clay added barium. Don't expect too much from factory teapots. Post 1977, 1990s, and 2000, teapots are the worst. So like these kind of comments, like it's true, 1977, if you really think about some of the really good quality clays, they used up 1970s, late 1970s. These clays were used up. And that is true. So when you start looking at teapots 1980s, 1990s, when you get past 1990s, it gets a little scary because who the heck knows what clay they're using. And early 2000s, my goodness, be wary because of the clarity and what kind of clay they're using. But you have to remember that if you hold the standard of Yixing from 1977, no person in their right mind can afford those teapots because the wealthy class in China and Taiwan started to spend an insane amount of money on these teapots. And if you really are a tea connoisseur and you're saying, oh, I really want one of those authentic teapots from the 1970s, good luck, because you're going to need to spend tens of thousands of dollars in order to obtain that type of unique, pristine clay. Now we're just trying to find, is there anything else that we could potentially use that could be beneficial to our tea production? So a little controversial topic, but I wanted to share that a little bit. Of course, if you're worried about all this, the best thing you can do is get a good gaiwan. You'll be fine. But those of you that are interested in teapots, I would just recommend don't try to find an authentic Yixing teapot from an older period and expect to pay a very small amount of money. And when you do go into that world, it is a extreme buyer's beware market. Don't believe everything you hear, don't believe everything you see, and really try to rely on your experience. So, wanted to share that to you all. Yeah, questions, thoughts, concerns. I'm going to drink a cup of tea, because in these live streams, I never drink a cup of tea. But yeah, I'm really excited to do some live streams this year and do some more pour. I'm also looking forward to the 2023 pour tea collections. If there are any this year, I hope there are. Looking forward to see what comes up. Also, award with antiques. this might be helpful too, since we're in this whole genre, is when you buy an antique, you should buy it for yourself. You should buy it if you like it. Don't buy it because it's old. Or don't buy it because someone told you it's old. The likelihood of antiques being authentic are very low. It's very high risk. Risk, not to say that you can't get them. There's antique cups like this. Like, this is an old cup, but this is not pricey. These are just like mass production cups. They're not pricey. But what's starting to happen, like these teapots, you go back 10 years ago, these gentleman collection late Era Yixing Teapots, cups like this, no one wants these. No one wants these pots because they're a dime a dozen, and just to reach away, there's very high quality clay, very high quality tea masters, and these were just kind of looked at as like, oh, just, hate to say this, maybe like garbage, junk, no needed, right? But now, because literally it's almost impossible to purchase those master pots, it's almost impossible to buy those very pristine antiques, these type of things are starting to emerge in the market. And their price is starting to skyrocket for some reason, even though 10 years ago or so, these have no price at all. So cheap, you can get them anywhere. But now, this is all that's available. So, anytime you purchase antiquely, I got some of these from Vietnam, from my wife's family. They just had them in their house for 3 generations or so. They don't even use them anymore. They aren't perfectly made. They obviously were export from China, not the highest quality, but they're old. They're quite unique. To me, I think they're quite beautiful. And I think if you like it and you enjoy it, I think it will add to your tea setup, and it's within your budget, and you're comfortable with that, and you're comfortable that after buying it, it might be fake, then it's probably worth buying. It's probably a safe way to buy antiques. Now, if you really want to buy the authentic old version, I probably can't help you there. But in my own experience, just buy things you like, that you enjoy, that are worth the value, and if you did buy them, and they turned out to be fake, you wouldn't be, super upset. I stopped really diving a lot into antiques. I don't really try to seek them out anymore, or purchase them later. They were not authentic, and that was very frustrating. So now if I naturally come across them in my life, and I see them, and they're kind of cool, I might get some. But I'm not actively trying to find antiques. I much rather prefer things I know for a fact, are good quality, I can experiment with them, and I know what they are and who made them and who uses them, and then I use that as a reference. See, I haven't got used to this kettle yet. I keep bumming things. Because my old fellow kettle I was using was a little bit smaller. This is a liter. I'm so used to using a 0.9 liter. I know that sounds like such a tiny amount, but I've used it for 3-4 years. I've used that fellow kettle. So just the extra bass and the spout pours faster, all of that takes some time getting used to. This is the first kettle I've ever seen that I actually wanted to use that wasn't fellow. So I'm glad there's more competition coming into the market. Alright, I need to make a new batch of this because I've been drinking this tea for all of yesterday. Alrighty, y'all, this is time. We got questions. Pop them in the chat below. If not, we'll wrap up today's live stream. But yeah, Yixing teapots are tough. The Yixing teapot I have that I cherish the most is this teapot that my tea master gave me. And I remember I was eyeing this teapot in the shop for, I don't know, 4 years. And it's a funny looking teapot. It's funny because I worked for her for so long. She never wanted to give it to me, sell it to me, even for the outrageous price. And then I finally got a hold of it this year from her. Thank goodness. This makes young raw pork exceptional. Just mind-blowingly so. Really cool little design too. Really well made. And that's it. It's funny. I've been doing this for over a decade, and I have one really good quality teapot. It's just funny. how hard it is to get those things. But that's okay. I am a poor tea professional. I'm not a teapot professional. I do not claim that I know anything about Yixing. I just find it quite interesting and wanted to share some thoughts. What am I drinking? Well, I am drinking. That sounds outrageous, I know. But these teapots are so mass-produced and they get clogged up so easy. And I got bored of using a little pick. That's how I clean out the spout. I'm drinking the Zhen Feng 2020. I always forget. It's 2021? 2022? 2022. Zhen Feng 2022 right pour. That's how I label all my tea jars so I remember what I'm drinking. I just rip off the wrapper and then put it in my jar. This right pour is by far probably one of my favorite right pours. Out of, like, by hands down. Better than any other factory right pour. There's the aerial fermentation component and the material is quite good. I mean, yep, I call it baby song song cha. So relaxing. But that's been the right tea I've been really drinking a lot recently. Oh, I know why I'm so weird. I usually drink tea from the kettle on this side. Yeah, it's so funny because some of these teapots I've gotten, some of the clay is significantly better than others. It's just there's no standard or consistency almost at all. So our pickings are slim, everyone. I apologize if you started to get into the tea a little bit later. Your pickings are slim, so just focus on the quality of the tea. You'll be much happier. That's also true with any craft. I don't know if any of you have gotten really into incense, but that's also true of incense, right? If you want really exceptionally high quality incense, good luck. But yeah, for right pour, not too bad. Over to you all. We'll get into the 30-minute mark. Unless you all have any questions or thoughts, concerns, feel free to share them in the comments below. As always, if you always have topics or questions for future videos, you can paste them in any of the videos I have on YouTube. I do live streams about once a month publicly, and then I also do a one focused educational video at the beginning of every month. Probably the next video will either be, will probably be the sake kettle. Just talk a little bit more about that so you all can make an educated, informed decision. This is the one for you. I'm a big fellow advocate. This is getting close. One reason you might consider this one is because the price is significantly different, because all the kettle's prices have jumped up significantly in the last year or two. Then that will be followed by a few more tea educational videos focused on pour. Hey Andrew, so they're not that different. They aren't like different to the point of different mines, which I don't know, to be honest. I don't know if they would come from different mines. I didn't know how many mines they had. They're just very slightly different. Like one maybe has a little bit more of the red pigment. One has more like purple kind of hue and tint to it. One's more brownish hue, one's more red. Some of the spouts, you can see the engraving tool they use to carve it down. Others you can't. But it's just kind of back and forth between a red, brown, and purple hue, and they just vary. The hues of the teapots slightly vary from set to set. But everything else seems pretty identical. And also I've noticed some of those pots have huge chunks of iron. They obviously probably didn't do as much filtering of the clay as they used to. And that might have been just due to limited resources. But I don't know. I mean, maybe some of the clays are substantially better than others, which wouldn't surprise me. Because, you know, who are these teapots made by? I don't know. Maybe this was made by a different apprentice. He was more picky with his clay. This was made by a different apprentice. He didn't care so much about the clay. I have no idea. I truly have no idea. But it's the difference between a red, purple, and brown hue. Those are the three variations of color that are ever so slight. But like to me in person, these are quite different. This is more brown. This is a little bit more red. But I don't even know if you can see them on the live stream. And also, just out of my instinct, I almost prefer to use this teapot rather than this. I don't even know why. I had a tough time making some good tea with this. This is probably going to have to be a right pour teapot. But also the way the water evaporates off the teapot. Yes. They do. They do make the tea taste a little bit different. This one, I can't quite put my hand on it. I just don't prefer it. I just feel this is a much more pure tea taste. And this just makes the tea more full and dry. And maybe that's good for some types of teas. But they do make the teas taste a little bit differently. But I also season this with raw pour. I season this one with ripe. But yeah, I'm going to revisit this more. And I'm going to start to experiment with my other dozens of ones and see if there's a difference. Other thing you might want to look for is the Yixing stamp on the bottom. How consistent and different it is. So far, most all of them are consistent except for the outer rim. One is more indented than the others, a little bit more uniformed. But you can definitely tell this teapot was made better than this one. And I'm assuming, because this is from a different set, each one comes in sets of 4, if you're lucky to find those. This is in a different set of 4 entirely. But you know, can't get picky with these kind of things, because don't have much selection of choice. You're just gonna kind of get what you get. But yeah, experiment with them. Alrighty, y'all. I think you're all heard enough of me chatting away. We'll wrap it up today. Oh, the Zen Feng, just my favorite. So good. Alrighty, y'all. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your support. Questions, comments, always welcome, anytime. Andrew, safe travels to you. And let me know your thoughts as you experiment with some of those. Curious to see your feedback. Especially with oolong. That'll be fun. Alrighty, y'all. Thanks so much. Happy New Year, too. It's Chinese Happy New Year next week, so enjoy it.